Hey, what's up, everyone? So, this will be video two in the playlist associated to my ACL stage two revision and the full journey from prehab, the surgery itself, the recovery from the surgery, and then the rehabilitation ahead of my return to sport some 18 months later. And with this video, what I'd like to cover is the background to this whole story. So, I've prepared a little something, and I'm going to talk through that and just give you a background of where I've come from, what I've been up to, what's led to the decision to have this stage two revision at the age of 40, and the things that have informed the type of graft that I'm going to go for, the rehab structure that I'm using, and all that sort of good stuff. So bear with me. Hopefully won't be too long, but I think it's an important bit of background for anyone who is facing a similar journey and finds this type of content interesting and hopefully informative in helping them have conversations with their medical team around the type of rehab that they need to be doing, the graft choices, the type of surgery that'll be right for them. And yeah, if it's helpful, great. So I've lived without an ACL in my left knee for just over 21 years now, coming up on 22 years. And the background to that is that in 2003 at Glenwood High School in South Africa, playing rugby, as is the South African way. I think it was first team trials, if I'm remembering correctly. It may have been second team trials. I can't recall. I think it was first team trials. There are a whole bunch of us, sort of the top tier of the school. So people who would be playing for first, seconds, maybe even thirds, doing trials ahead of the opening of the rugby season. And I remember quite clearly how the injury had happened. Now, interestingly, I think the initial the initial offense to the left knee may have happened the year before. I was on a snowboarding holiday with my family, and I remember, I can't remember exactly what happened in snowboarding, but I remember the knee being sore, and I remember having to ice the knee a bit because it got a bit inflamed and unhappy. So never had that diagnosed, because once the swelling had gone down, everything felt fine. I carried on like normal. There was no indication that I would need further diagnostics. So never thought anything of it until it went in 2003. And in hindsight, maybe I could have done with some diagnostics in 2002, but such is life. So I remember in 2003, I was running, we'd kicked the ball to the opposing side and they were coming towards us. And I watched the player run towards me, Guthrie Holiday, I think it was. That was his name. Good guy. And he was running towards me, and I could see him load on his right leg, and I knew what he was going to do. He was going to sidestep and cut back to his left, my right. And so, in getting ready to make the tackle, I watched him load onto his right leg, and I had to load onto my left leg because I was going to bounce off the left leg and catch him as he tried to sidestep and come around the inside of me. And as I went to do that, I had this like pop, the most excruciating pain that lasted just a split second. It was a split second pain and then it was gone. But my knee basically folded over, and I fell to the ground. And I remember my sort of foot being in a funny position on the floor, and then I straightened my leg and it sort of snapped back into place and felt weird. And I was there for a moment or two trying to figure out what had happened. It's like I say, there was that initial pain. It was really, really severe, and then it was gone. And I stood up, and the best way I can describe it is the knee felt unstable. I couldn't have articulated that at the point. I didn't know what I was feeling. It was unstable. It felt weird. So I went off the field. I felt I couldn't carry on playing. When I sat on the stands, and Joyce Morton, I don't know if she still practices. She was a brilliant physiotherapist in the Glenwood area of Durban. She used to do the physio for our school rugby team. I think she went on and did it for the Sharks and then maybe even South Africa as well. Absolutely fantastic physio. This is 2 and a bit decades ago, so I don't know if Joyce is still in practice. If she is, fantastic. If she's not, she's probably retired, and that's fine. But she was on the sidelines, and I remember going up to her and saying, "Look, something's up with my knee. I'm not sure what's going on here." And she did a Latchman test. Didn't know it was called the Latchman test at the time, but she basically had me like sit down, lifted my leg, and just pulled the knee away. So it had me bend my knee to like a 45-degree angle and just pulled on it like that. And the knee separated quite a lot and was quite uncomfortable. And she's like, you've done your ACL. So I had to go and report that to the coach. I was in boarding school at Glenwood. So they then called my parents. We went through, iced the knee, went off to Instability, which is the local hospital in the area. Long story short, I had it properly diagnosed. Yes, I completely ruptured the ACL in the left knee, completely snapped it in half, and needed to have it replaced. So the following weeks after that were conversations with the surgeon, Mr. Blanche. I can't remember his first name. He's passed on since, so he's no longer with us, but he was a fantastic surgeon. And I remember the conversations being about, like, well, what do you want to carry on doing? I'm an avid surfer. I was surfing competitively at the time. I wanted to surf competitively, and that's what I wanted to do as a vocation. That didn't work out. I enjoyed playing rugby. I was playing club rugby, high school rugby. Just I was all round active. I was in really good shape. I was an active guy, and I wanted to continue to be active. And so, conversations for the first ACL replacement, it was a case of getting that speed to getting back to physical activity as quickly as possible seemed to be the name of the game. Now, I can sit here at 40 and I can criticize the hell out of that because I've got the benefit of hindsight, and hindsight's always 2020, right? So it would be unfair. One, my surgeon at the time has passed on. He's not here to defend himself. And two, hindsight's always 2020. And when you're in it at the moment, you're in a different mindset, you're in a different space. So I wasn't capable at that point in my life of being told, look, you need to slow down. You need to just think about this a little bit. There are some decisions that you're going to make here that are going to affect the rest of your life. People try to have conversations like that with me, and it was fruitless. Let's be honest. I was 18. I fancied myself immortal and invincible. Physically, I had never had to really put hard, serious effort into anything in my life. Being good at the sports that I enjoyed, being in tremendous physical shape, being strong and fit and healthy, all of that stuff had happened by default. It had happened as a consequence of just playing and enjoying the sports that I enjoyed. I played the sports, I participated in them because I enjoyed them, and therefore the enjoyment of them, not for the physical benefit of them. The physical benefit and the health benefit was a happy consequence of my participation. It was nothing that I'd ever trained specifically for. Now at 40, it's a very different story. I now understand a lot more about metabolic health. I understand a lot more about how these things all work. So my approach is completely different. So I'm commenting now from the perspective of myself at 40, knowing all the things that I know now. Yes, I do wish I could go back to being 18 in 2003 and change the decisions that were made at the time. Cannot. But if this is helpful to anyone who's facing that first stage revision or first stage reconstruction, then perhaps you can hear me out here. The conversation with my surgeon at the time was to do an autograft. So now an autograft is where they take a piece of your own tissue. At the time in 2003, it was hamstring tendon or patella tendon, patella bone. They have since come out with a thigh tendon, a quadricep tendon that they use. And it's a bit of a mixed bag, depending on your surgeon as to which they prefer there. Now, my surgeon was more comfortable with a hamstring tendon. He had suggested, and I remember the conversation being that kneeling after a patella bone graft is potentially problematic in some, quite painful, and it prevents him from kneeling quite a lot. And I was doing life-saving and
surfing and stuff. And there were various activities that would require me to be able to kneel comfortably that I wasn't happy with having that kind of sacrifice. So we decided to go for a hamstring autograft. Went in for the surgery. The surgery wasn't without its complications. Um, Leon Gravenstein, who I think is still with us, was my GP at the time. He assisted with the surgery. And being a close family friend from the Uncomaskopra area, he sort of spilt the beans after the fact. You would think that they would have some sort of a prop on which your leg would rest and hold your leg at the sort of angle and the position that they needed to be in to get the anchor points drilled into your femur and your tibia. Apparently they didn't. And Leon was trying to hold my legs. Now I've got thick legs. I've got heavy set Dutchman-like legs. And so Leon was struggling with that. And suffice to say, they got a few extra holes in there because the angles weren't quite working out. But I ended up in a position where for the next 3 to 4 months, I was in a complete thigh to ankle brace, locked range of motion, and I wasn't allowed to weight bear for the first while. I think it was the first 8 weeks while we were waiting for those extra bits of bone to fill back in. So the surgery didn't go exactly to plan, but I did recover from that. That was fine. But being 18, and as I covered, I'd never had to take anything seriously physically in my life at that point. Everything had just come naturally through participation. And I didn't have the insight, I didn't have the mindset. And unfortunately, I wasn't opening to listening to everyone because it's not a case that no one was telling me to take this seriously. Plenty of people were telling me to take it seriously. I wasn't mentally capable of understanding what they meant and then doing it. That's on me. But I didn't rehab it properly. I sort of did the early stage stuff to a degree. I got a bit depressed. I gained a bunch of weight because I still ate in the same fashion as I did before the surgery, piled on weight, got a bit self-conscious about that. And I just wanted to return to playing sport because that's what I was used to. I wasn't used to hard physical training to facilitate my participation in sport. My participation had always been basically automatic. And I didn't rehab it properly. I eventually, after 9 months, I got the clearance to return to sport. I got back into surfing, had a brace that we used just to give a bit of extra protection, got back into life. So we never went back to rugby. It had sort of put me off rugby. And the trade-off there was I wanted to be a competitive surfer, and I was decent. I was in no way, shape, or form the best in South Africa, but I was decent. I did relatively well. I did very well in my local region on the South Coast. I did very, very well there. And then at a national level, I did okay. I think, again, hindsight being 2020, had I taken seriously back then the way that kids do now, where they have the viable opportunity to create a life around it as a competitor. Had I trained seriously back then and dedicated myself to surfing, I think I could have probably had a good crack at it. I think I could have had a good crack at the QS, but I at the time I wanted to do everything, and I didn't have the right mindset. So the ACL injury robbed me, in my perspective at that time, of my potential career in surfing. And so I had a very bitter taste left in my mouth with regard to rugby. And I never went back to playing rugby after that. I finished matric. The initial surgery, I think, was in the May or the June of 2003. I can't remember exactly. But so my entire rehab and recovery period was the remainder of my matric year. And I then finished school, didn't go back to playing rugby, but did get back into surfing. And then I had to find a job and be an adult and all that sort of good fun stuff. And so life moved on. Now, in 2004, I was in the States. I had sort of like a gap year. I went overseas. I had to go find myself basically and grow up, go fend for myself out in the big wide world, which did me the world of good. But one of the downsides was I had a very, very, very turbulent relationship with alcohol. And I sit here now as a recovering alcoholic. I've been sober since September 2023. Faced those demons, nailed them into a box, and on the road to recovery. So that's all good. But at the time, I was in the States, unsupervised, left up to my own devices, and there was a bottle of tequila involved. We'll leave it at that. But I vaguely recall trying to run races down a road with a bunch of guys that I was partying with, and something went wrong. It's just, I remember running and then having tremendous amounts of pain, and basically having done my knee again, completely ruptured the replacement graft, mostly because I hadn't rehabbed it properly. So that, again, on me. Fast forward to later in 2004. In fact, I think it might have been 2005. Had returned to South Africa at that point, went into hospital, had an arthroscopy, confirmed that, yep, I had in fact re-ruptured the graft they showed me. It looked like, if you can imagine taking a whole bunch of rubber bands and twisting them all together to form like a rope, and then someone goes and cuts in the middle of that like frayed effect that you would get. That's what the inside of my knee looked like. So my surgeon cleared everything out, basically removed the failed graft, and got rid of everything that was sort of in the cavity of the knee, and wanted to let the knee then rest and recover, and then talk about future surgery options. Now, unfortunately, he passed away. From memory, he had a heart attack during the Tour de Urban cycling event. So this was 2005, I think it was. And that was a shock. Obviously, I wasn't close friends with the guy. He wasn't a close family friend or anything like that. But obviously, like that was him. He was done now. And the downside or the consequence of that was I then never got round to having the replacement surgery. I'd sort of learned to live without the ligament at that point in time. And you can. You can function perfectly well without an ACL if you develop the legs enough, your quadriceps, your hamstring, and get the leg good and strong to give you more stability to compensate for the lack of the ACL. So that's what we did. Got my leg good and strong, and 21 years later, here I am. And in that time, I have continued to surf. I've skateboarded, I've surf skated, I've done Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I've done those things at a fairly high level of performance. In fact, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu I've been competitive at. Surfing, I continued to try and compete through my sort of latter teen, early 20s. I did mixed martial arts as well. I did that competitively. So I've done fairly well, given the lack of the ACL, which again is no surprise. Joost van der Westhuizen, late great South African scrum half. He played, I think, most, if not all, of his rugby career without the ACLs in either of his knees. So it can be done, and I've done that. But through my mid to late 30s, the instances of instability increased notably. And the consequence of the instability started to get a little bit more and more, because with the ACL missing, the instability that I found most was where my leg was extended, like fully extended. The bottom would slip, the two halves of the knee would separate. And that would cause meniscus tears, damage to the cartilage, pain, swelling, all that sort of good stuff. And that was starting to happen more and more often. And of course, being older, the recovery from it wasn't quite as quick. You weren't bouncing back within a couple of days anymore. It was now a couple of weeks of the knee being angry and inflamed and upset. And so I started the process of wanting to get this addressed. So through the NHS here in the UK, because in the meantime I'd relocated to the UK, married with kids, settled here. This is now home and has been for a long time. So consulted my GP, went through the whole process, saw my orthopedic surgeon, and we agreed that, yep, for the level of activity that I enjoy and I want to hope to continue to enjoy into later life, it makes sense to do the ACL revision now, hopefully recover from that fully. And if I can, it may mean that I'm able to avoid further degradation of the knee and therefore avoid the need for full knee replacement later in life. Because for the level of sport that I do and the type of sport that I enjoy doing, if you think about surfing, for example, that's a lot of twisting, pivoting, power through twists and pivots as you're doing maneuvers. Your knee needs a good amount of integrity, and certainly having full knee replacement would impede that. I would not be able to surf to the level of performance that I enjoy and the way that I want to do it. It would require changes that I would struggle with from a mental health perspective, because I'm a very competitive person by nature. Every time I'm it's a heat, whether it's a competition or not, in my head, it's a heat. I'm watching everyone else. I'm theoretically scoring them, and then I'm theoretically scoring myself in a way. That's how my head works. I enjoy that. I enjoy competing. It's just how I'm wired. So the prospect of I suppose you could say the choices that were presented was, I can continue as I have been without the ACL, continue to make sure that the leg is kept as strong and capable as possible. I will have the odd instances of instability. That's inevitable. It's going to happen. And I may have additional injuries that come with that. And at some point down the line, the knee will degrade to the point where it's no longer viable. It's really impeding my quality of life, and full knee replacement becomes the necessary option. Or I can undergo the revision now, which is your second ACL replacement, go through the rehab and recovery from that, and then hopefully continue with the level of sport and physical activity that I enjoy, with the stability of having that ACL in place, and avoid the need for full knee replacement later in life. So weighing those options up, and given that I'm older now, I have a better appreciation of the effort required to look after my health. I've got a whole health journey that I talk about in my podcast, the Animal Based Dad podcast, which you can also find on my YouTube channel here, a separate playlist worth having a look at. I'm at the point where I understand that I need to invest into my health daily, because my health or health span is directly correlated to my quality of life. And I need to keep that as high as possible for as long as possible through my life, because I want to hit 70, 80 years old, still fully functional, independent, capable, and living a high quality of life. That's the most important thing to me. If I'm living a high quality of life, I'm a benefit and a blessing to those around me rather than a burden. So yeah, that's what I want to do. To do that, I need to look after myself as best possible, and therefore the right choice for me at this stage is to undergo the ACL revision, take seriously the recovery and rehab protocol, give it the time it needs, give it the effort that it requires, and hopefully come out the other side fully functional again and able to continue with all the benefits of a intact left knee. So that was the decision that was made between myself and my surgeon here in the UK. We decided, yes, we're going to go ahead. In 2023, I had the stage 1 revision, which is where they went in and They cleared out the metalwork and the anchor points of the previous failed graft, because my surgeon in 2005 had cleared out the remnants that were in the cavity of the knee itself, the bits that were getting sort of stuck where my knee was coming together. Cleared out all the frayed bits, but he hadn't taken out the anchor points in the femur and the tibia. So the stage 1 revision in 2023 went in and took out those anchor points, did some bone grafts to set what would be the new anchor points. Recovered from that, took the rehab seriously, got through everything well, but then life got in the way. Life just got a bit complicated. So instead of having the stage 2 revision 6 months later, it's now been nearly 2.5 years after that. And we're now at the point where we've got a date set for the stage 2 revision. So what we've decided to go for, and I'll just take a moment to talk through this. So if you recall, toward the beginning, I said that my first ACL reconstruction was using a hamstring autograft. I have learned a very valuable lesson there. And my caution to anyone who is looking at this kind of surgery and trying to weigh up the graft options is not to rob Peter to pay Paul. What I mean by that is there are no spare parts. You don't have spare tendons and you don't have spare ligaments just hanging around in case you need them to go and put them somewhere else to replace something else that you've damaged. The body doesn't work that way. Autograft comes with the cost of compromise. In my particular case, the hamstring autograft, the tendon that they harvested out of my left hamstring to use as my ACL replacement in 2003 left my left hamstring compromised to the point where we're nearly 22 years down the line now, and I have spent a long time working my legs really hard, independently, trying to get my left leg to equal my right leg, to get it as strong and capable. And even now, despite my most dedicated efforts, the left hamstring is notably compromised versus the right hamstring. It has maybe 60% of the strength. It struggles. To try and give a description, when I engage the right hamstring and I pull, and everything sort of pulls up towards my buttocks. The left hamstring, we engage that and lift your leg or you curl down. Let's say you're doing seated leg curls. On my right leg, if I engage, everything tenses and pulls towards my buttocks. And you can feel the main tendons running along that as they sort of pull in. With the left hamstring, when I do that same movement, on the bottom part nearest the knee, there's a difference. Instead of pulling towards my buttocks, it feels like the muscle pulls outward toward the sides of my legs. And best I can tell, it's where that part of the tendon is now missing that is pulling different. And I just don't have the strength anymore. Don't get me wrong, it is strong. I've got it good and strong and probably more capable than the average man my age. But it is compromised versus the other side. And I've had to live with that compromise for the last 21 and a bit years. I will continue to live with that compromise for the rest of my life. Nothing I'm doing is able to get the left hamstring to perform the way the right hamstring does. It is now compromised, and it's like that forever. So that is my word of caution to you. They are, if you're going for an autograft, in my opinion, the only time an autograft makes sense is if, let's say, you're a professional sportsman or sportswoman and you need to get back to performing at a professional level as quickly as possible because your livelihood depends on it. Yeah, then fine. And the reason I say that is an autograft obviously incorporates and recovers far quicker than an allograft. An allograft being donor tissue. Now, my personal opinion, based on my experience, I'm not a professional sportsman. I'm just someone who enjoys doing a high level of sport. I understand that it's important for my health. I understand that it's important for everything that I want to achieve in life, health span wise. And I enjoy competing, not professionally, but amateur competition. I just enjoy competing and I want to be able to do that. So we're talking a high level of sport still, but I know that the compromise that came with that autograft is not something I would ever repeat. So I've had that conversation with my surgeon. I've said, look, I'm not willing to compromise another part of me. I don't have any other part of me that I want to go through the same experiences I've had with my left hamstring. I don't want to compromise it. So we've discussed the pros and cons of an allograft, which is to take a donor tissue. In my case, we're going to be using a donor Achilles that has been freeze-dried, not irradiated, because that irradiation is how they would sterilize them previously. But they would compromise the cellular structure, the cellular integrity of that donor graft. So in the UK, at least, they've moved more towards freeze drying to sort of make sure that that has killed off any microbes and made that piece of tissue sterile. We're going to use a donor Achilles. We're going to put that into my left knee, and that will take longer to recover from and to rehab. So what's been explained to me, and a good way to sort of conceptualize this, is the donor tissue, the donor graft, the Achilles in this case, gets implanted the same as they would an autograft. They put it in, give an anchor point in the femur, anchor point in the tibia, and it then sits where the ACL would sit. That doesn't come back to life. So it's not like the donor Achilles comes back to life as such. Rather, a good way to think about it is it forms a lattice. It forms a structure upon which your own cells then grow, form your own vasculature, your own cells grow over this, and that tissue then ligamentizes, I think would be the term. But that takes a very long time versus using your own live tissue. It takes 18 to 24 months based on some of the studies that we've been reading and having a look at. And so the reason most people, most surgeons, most physios keep harping on about wanting autografts is, A, they're dealing with the younger population who are not capable of the patience and dedication it's going to take to rehab a allograft correctly. B, talking about the population who need to return to sport quicker. If you are someone who is not going to rehab it properly and you're going to try and return to sport quicker, an allograft will not be a good choice for you, because from 0 to 18 months, there's a very high rate of re-injury, of graft failure. People try and return to sport too quickly, do too much too quickly, before that graft is vascularized and incorporated. And so the literature skews in that favor, and it says that allografts are not as good. Yes, in that 0 to 18 month window, 100% allografts are not good if within that first 18 months you are hoping to return to competitive sport or high level sport or to doing anything that you're trying to do. An allograft needs to be a slower recovery and rehab process. It needs to be a purposely slower recovery and rehab process, because you have to allow time for that graft to develop vascularization, its own blood flow and blood network, and then to incorporate properly. Like I said, it doesn't magic back to life. Your own cells have to grow over it, incorporate it, and become its own thing. Can't rush that. It takes long, 18 to 24 months, and then you should be ready for a return to high-level sport, high-level physical activity. So we've decided that's the route we're going to go. For me, we're going to use donor Achilles, and at 40 years old, I am perfectly okay with taking 18 to 24 months to rehab this thing properly to go through a very slow, very deliberate recovery and rehab protocol, to then come out on the other side fully recovered and able to perform at the top possible level that I can. And interestingly, in the literature, where people have given the allograft a minimum of 18 months or longer, hence my 18 to 24-month window, the recovery stats is that it's as good, if not better, as strong, if not stronger, than autografts. So in that 0 to 18-month window, allografts have got the higher rate of rupture, significantly higher. But beyond that 18-month window, there's no statistical significant difference between allografts and autografts at all. If anything, the allograft is stronger according to some of the tests that they've done. So if you're willing to take the time, if you're going to do, if you're at peace with the fact that you're going to not rob Peter to pay Paul, right? You're not going to harvest another piece yourself, compromising a different piece yourself to replace the thing that you've damaged. You're going to take a donor piece of tissue and you've made your piece that is going to take longer to recover from. You can go through that recovery process, as I'm about to. You can come out of it on the other side 18 to 24 months later and be better off, in my opinion, better off than had you gone for the autograft and gone for the quicker road to recovery. I say better off because A, there'll be no statistically significant difference between the actual graft and its strength and integrity. The literature is quite clear on that. And B, you then have not robbed Peter to pay Paul. You have not compromised any other part of your body. Wish if I could, and it's a bit futile to do this, but to help drive the point home, I could take myself back to 2003, put the mindset I have today into 18-year-old me. I would have chosen an autograft every day of the week and twice on Sundays because I would have accepted that it's going to be a longer recovery time, but I'm not going to compromise my left hamstring. And I'll come out on the other side of it better off, not re-rupture it a year later, and not be in the position that I'm in today. So, for what it's worth, talk to your surgeon, talk to your medical team about the difference in rehab and recovery. Yes, allografts have got a higher rupture rate, a higher failure rate within the first 18 months. But, and this is an important bit of nuance that you need to have within that discussion, if you are willing and able to accept a longer recovery and rehab time, 18 plus months, there's no statistically significant difference in rupture rates between autografts and allografts. And you have the added bonus of not having compromised whichever other part of you they're wanting to harvest tendon tissue from to replace the ACL. For me, every day of the week, twice on Sundays, I'm choosing the allograft because I've had to live with the compromise of my hamstring tendon graft from 2003. I've had 21 plus years of living with that decision, and I regret it. Wish I was capable at that time of having accepted an allograft, because the compromise in the hamstring has not been worth it. It's been significant and it has been noticed. So that's where we are today. So I'm going in on the 16th of January, Basingstoke Hospital in Hampshire, UK. Going to go have my stage 2 revision using a Achilles allograft. And my surgeon is also doing a augmented or he's augmenting the procedure with another procedure. It's called a modified Lemaire tenodesis. I will include that in the video description below, the correct spelling, so you can look it up and see what that is. But there's basically a sort of bit of connective tissue that runs down the outside of your knee that they will divide into thirds. They'll take that middle third and fold it back into the knee and plant that onto the tibia. And it just gives the knee a bit of protection from rotational instability. It's going to augment the ACL. The ACL will stop the knee from slipping. It also helps with the twisting, but this will augment the stability from the twisting perspective. And that has been decided on specifically because of the types of sports that I enjoy doing. So surfing in particular, that's a lot of pivoting, and it's power through pivoting in a dynamic plane. And what I mean by that is, if you think about skateboarding or snowboarding or something like that, you're moving over something that is static. With surfing, you're moving over something that is moving itself. It's a far more dynamic plane to navigate and negotiate. And the forces, you're doing cutbacks and carves and turns and like hitting the lip, and the forces are dynamic and quite severe. Like, you need a very, very stable knee for that. As an example, and I'll edit this into the video here. You'll see that's me surfing at the wave pool a bit earlier this year, a bit earlier in 2025. On my backhand, not surfing very well by any stretch of the imagination. I've ended up in a situation where I'm surfing once, twice a year max, and have been doing for a decade. I'm hoping to fix that in the future, but that's another story. So I'm not surfing to a high level, certainly not like I used to. But if you look at those movements in the backhand where I'm coming off the bottom to the top of the wave, I mean, it's a strong pivot with my back leg and my left leg having to straighten out and push. That destroys my knee. Like with the ACL missing, every time I'm doing that, I'm getting slide with the halves are separating. As a result, I got out of that session and I limped around for days, and he was puffed up, inflamed, full of fluid, very angry. And I struggled for days afterwards. So it's very clear that if I'm hoping to surf and I'm hoping to do more than just cruise on a wave, if I'm hoping to actually do maneuvers and stuff, especially on my backhand, and something about the angles that you're moving at on your backhand versus your forehand is a bit different. Forehand, I don't struggle as much. It doesn't hurt as much after surfing on my forehand as it does on the backhand. The backhand just really articulates that one movement that just makes those two halves slide. So it's very clear that I need this replacement done if I want to continue surfing, at least to the level that I hope to enjoy. So yeah, you just that modified Lemaire tenodesis will help with that and give that extra stability so that I can return to high level surfing, maybe even competitive surfing for my age group. Who knows? Like I said, I'm a very competitive person. I enjoy competing. I would love to compete again, but that's a little way down the line, and I need to get there. I need to work on it and get the stability back. I need to rehab it properly. It's going to take a long time, but I will walk you through this journey. I will take you with me. We will see how it's going. And yeah, so this video was just to give a bit of a background to where I've come from, the previous surgeries that I've had, what went wrong, what failed, the lessons that I've learned, the thoughts and decisions around this next surgery, what has helped me make those decisions, the regrets that I have from earlier in my life and the first surgeries that I've had, and the things that if it helps you, please take that away. And again, you will see, and I've done this a lot. I'm someone who likes to go into this as well informed as I can. I've spent a lot of time reading. I've spent a lot of time watching videos from surgeons and particularly from physios talking about ACL reconstruction, ACL revision, and the recovery process. They all bark on about autograft. There's a few that are honest enough to give that nuance. And where, yes, for the first 18 months, Autograft is by far the better option because it's got the lower re-rupture rate, the lower failure rate. But beyond 18 months, there's no statistically significant difference between an autograft and an allograft. And the takeaway that I'd give you, if you have the mindset to hear this and understand it, hear it and understand it well. You have no spare parts. An autograft is robbing Peter to pay Paul while compromising the area that they are harvesting that tissue from. And you're going to have to live with that compromise for the rest of your life. Now, perhaps you're luckier than me. Perhaps you don't even notice a difference. I was maybe unlucky, but I can tell you now my left hamstring has never been the same. Despite dedicated effort, I've only been able to get it to about 60% strength and capability of my right hamstring. And then that is years and years of working on it, trying to level it out. I cannot get it to the same. It is compromised because of the tissue that they took away. That tissue doesn't regrow. It doesn't magic back. Once it's gone, it's gone. And you live with the consequence of that. So if you have the opportunity, if you've got correct mindset and you can dedicate yourself to a longer recovery period, an 18-month plus recovery and rehab period before you try to return to the type of sport and activity that you want to do, an allograft is going to be the better option for you because you are then not compromising something else in your body to replace the missing ligament. I hope you found that useful. Please like and subscribe. I'm going to be doing a video like this weekly. I'm going to take you through my rehab as we lead into January. I'm going to take you through the surgery itself, the initial recovery from the surgery, and then the long rehab process. But we're going to be doing it from a metabolic health perspective, not just a physio perspective. But what I mean by that is we're going to look at the holistic view of the body trying to heal and recover. That means we're going to be paying attention to my nutrition, my sleep and recovery, the movement, not just the rehab of the leg itself, but everything else that I'm doing, because it's well documented now. In fact, I just need to remind myself what the terminology is called. Cross-education effect. There we go. Go look that up. Cross-education effect. In fact, I will provide a couple of links in the video description below. Cross-education effect is where training the other leg. So let's say for me, I'm going for the surgery on my left leg. My right leg is not having the surgery. I can get back into gym and I can work the right leg individually as I was before, more or less. Doing that, getting back into the gym, whilst I'm still on my crutches and everything and having to take it easy on the left leg, getting back into the gym and working out the rest of me is going to provide the cross-education effect, which basically results in lower loss of muscle and lower loss of functionality in the affected limb. So again, there's a couple links in the video description for you to look up cross-education effect and see what it's like. But yeah, we're going to go through the whole approach holistically, from every aspect to do with metabolic health, because metabolic health underpins your physical and your mental health. It's literally your health at the level of the individual cell. And if you get that right, everything else that you need to happen, including the healing and recovery from the surgery, is enabled. So you focus on your metabolic health, everything else downstream of that, which includes your healing and recovery, is augmented, is enabled, is empowered. So that's how I'm going to approach this, and I hope that you find it helpful and useful. Drop some comments in if you've got any questions, if you need any info. If you've got any critiques, please drop them in and we can have a conversation and compare notes. Thanks, everyone.